join me in welcoming Dr. Rebecca Isbell. Welcome and thank you so much.
It is such a joy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all the hard work that the folks have done here to have this for you. And I said, when I was talking with her, I said, how much is it going to cost for the people who are going to attend? And she said, free. And I'm like, free? That's the best yet. So I'm so glad that you're here, and I want to congratulate you as well on being out on Saturday morning to get some more training and to learn some more things about young children. I have been touched by getting to meet early childhood educators all over the world. And as I travel from Texas to New York to California to Singapore to Beijing, I find that there is one thing that ties us all together. We are a certain kind of person. People who work with young children are very special people. And you are a part of that group. And one of the characteristics that I see that binds us together is that we enjoy working with young children 0 to 8 years of age. Is that correct? Let me just start out by saying I live in Jonesboro, Tennessee, which is the storytelling capital of the world. And I know you're going to hear me tell some stories today. But one of the things that happens every year in October when we have the Storytelling Festival is we have deaf storytellers. Have you ever seen a deaf storyteller? And what happens with a deaf storyteller is, of course, they tell it with their hands and with their gestures and with their facial expressions. And when they finish, we are always so touched by their stories because it's such a unique way of telling a story, but they can't hear us do this. So what we do is this. And I have used that now as my trademark. Wherever I speak to people, if you have an idea or you agree with something I say, I want you to go, can you do that? Come on. Because we know that you learn best when you participate, right? And so if you hear something that you agree with, I want you to go like this. So now let me start again. I know that one of the things I find out about early childhood people all over the world is that they love music. And I got to hear that this morning with you. What a wonderful way to begin your day with a song. And what we know now is that it not only makes you feel good inside, but it also makes that brain pop. Whoa. Now what can you ask? I also find that early childhood educators tend to be positive people. I've been accused, and maybe you have too, that I see the world through rose-colored glasses. Have you ever heard that? Well, I have. And maybe I do. But I find that most early childhood people believe in the positive aspects of the world, and particularly of the positive aspects of little children. Because every day we are lucky enough to be blessed to see their little minds busting. And we know that we are part of that. Now, because some people don't understand how valuable we are, when I first started in early childhood, people say, can little kids really learn anything? Have you ever heard that? Yes. They can learn a heck of a lot. But today I hear people say, oh, little kids are so smart. They can learn so much. Whoa, what a nice change that they recognize that. I also find that early childhood educators like to eat. be that they eat different things because they're from different parts of the world, but they still like to eat. And we enjoy that. We also love children's books. Actually, I probably love children's books more than adult books. My children used to say, "Where's Mom?" when we would go into a bookstore or a place that had books. "Where's Mom? Where's Mom?" And my son always say, "In the children's books." Because that was true. Because I love children's books. And I know that they're such a wonderful thing. But I also find that early childhood people in general are very creative people who love to play. Now, isn't it wonderful that we're in a profession where it's okay? I have a friend who's in banking, heaven forbid. And she says, "Oh, I hate to go to work every day. It's so miserable." And I think, oh, it would be miserable, wouldn't it? To go to work every day and count money. Maybe not so bad if you could take some of it home, but the problem is you can't. But we are in a profession where we can, if we will, enjoy and play with children. And I hope that you will leave today, if nothing else, I hope you will leave today recognizing and re-endorsing that young children learn best through play. Not sitting in their seats and repeating after me, but playing. And I'm going to give you some ideas about how to do that today. And if some of you come to my second session, I have one on learning centers. Well, I'll tell to you about setting them up and how you do that. So I'm going to talk about that today, but I want you to go away with one thing in your head, if nothing else, that it is okay to play and that it is a beneficial intellectual activity for young children. All right? And when we finish, I'm going to say, did you remember? But before we go on, I want to do one thing. I want you to stand. And I want you to go to the person on your right, and I want you to shake their hand, and I want you to say this. Wait just a minute. I want you to shake their hand and say, "You do important work with young children. You do important work with children." The most important person that has the most influence in that classroom is you. And they can do all the research studies that they want about all the different curriculums, all the different materials, but the critical factor that makes the difference is you as the teacher. And don't forget it. And so when somebody says, "What do you do?" I am an early childhood educator. Woohoo! Be proud. Have a seat. I love being in Texas and I love being with you because it's a great place where people will participate. The first time I went to Beijing, China, they sat there and looked at me for a while. It was like, and who is this strange woman jumping around and talking silly? And it took them about an hour with me to build up a relationship, but after that we were fine. But at the first I was thinking, oh my gosh. But I love being here with you because I know you're not going to do that. You are participators and you are involved. Yes, and I like that, and I hope you will continue to do that throughout the day and when you're with children. Now, let's get to the meat of this story. Play is active. How many little children have you ever seen that said, "Teacher, teacher, can I go somewhere and be quiet?" Nobody shaking their hands. Little children want to be active. Now, they can be active because you allow them to be active, or they can be active because they choose to be active. I have a good friend who's a psychologist, and he got a call. And let me say, I do have a copy of the notes that I'm going to be talking about today. So if you want to go on my website, drisbell.com, Monday it will be right there, and you can just copy it off. Okay? I know I have a hard time writing and thinking at the same time. Do you have that problem? Anyway, he was invited to go to a school, a kindergarten classroom, in a very, how can I say this nicely, structured classroom. That's a nice way of saying it. And the teacher called, actually I think it was the principal who called and said, "We have this little boy in our kindergarten classroom who we believe is hyperactive. We believe he has attention deficit disorder." And so my friend who's a psychologist went to that kindergarten classroom to observe this little 5-year-old boy. He spent the entire morning with him. And when he came back, I said, "Well, Wes, how did it go?" And he said to me, and I want you to remember this, he said, "There is not a 5-year-old boy in the world who would not be hyperactive in that classroom." And I said, "Well, tell me about it." And he said, "Well, first of all, the room was filled with tables and chairs. And he was required for long periods of time to sit in that chair. And he said he was a neat little kid. He really wanted to do the right thing. He really wanted to please his teacher. So he started out the day trying to sit in the chair. And about 15, 20 minutes into it, things turned bad. And he couldn't help it. His little body just started moving. And first he started moving like this. And then he started moving a little bit more. And then he crawled under the table and he beat on the table from underneath. Now, why did he do that? Because he was a bad little kid? He had no activity. He was told to be set, quiet, listening, and not allowed to move, play, or do. And so he tried for a while, and then his body could no longer handle it. And he literally, physically exploded. Now, was it the fault of this little boy? Was he attention deficit disorder? No. He was in an environment that didn't understand that young children need activity. They are spontaneous. You don't have to make them play. They want to play. They enjoy it. It is a joyful experience for them. They are self-initiated. How many times at Christmas time you've seen the boxes sitting around the room? And you have this wonderful toy that does 999 things. And what are the children playing with? The boxes. Why are they playing with the boxes? Because the boxes are open-ended. They can do whatever they want to, and they can be physically active when they do it. And so they are intensely involved. People are talking a lot today about, well, we want the children to be engaged. Yeah, I'd like them to be engaged too. You want to watch some engaged children? Watch them play. They're really engaged, right? Come on, you hadn't forgot, have you? I know you haven't. It is one of the best avenues for learning. And we're going to talk about how that is. They are internally motivated to play, and they are, and this is one of the big catchwords these days, persistent. We want them to be persistent on a task. Okay? Watch them building blocks. You want to see somebody persistent? There they are, working and thinking and talking about how they're going to build this or that, because it's part of what they're interested in. Now, just for background, we know that the play environment has to match the level of the child, right? Infants will play with one kinds of things, toddlers will play with another, preschoolers and kindergartners with different. So we know that there's some things that go across all ages. How many of you in here work with infants? Raise your hand proud, ladies and gentlemen. Now these people deserve a special clap. Because they're the ones that are going to get them off to a good start. They're the ones that are going to have the environment that will make them want to come, enjoy what they're doing, excited about being in this place. They're getting them started. How many of you in here are teachers or work with toddlers? Actually, I have to tell you this. I try not to be partial, but toddlers are my very favorite people. I love toddlers. Now, some people say, well, they won't do anything I want to do. That's true. Because what we are seeing is this is the age where they begin to develop their own thinking and their own ideas. Isn't that wonderful? Because we want independent thinkers. These folks need a special thank you for being the most patient people in this audience. How many of you work with preschoolers or kindergarten children? Okay. Now these people are working with children when they are the most creative that they will ever be. E. Paul Torrance says that you are the most creative person when you are 4 years old. Wow. So that means that you are working with children who are in the midst of that creativity. And what that means is, and I know this is hard to take sometimes, teachers of preschoolers and kindergartners, they come up with better ideas than you do. True? And isn't that great? We should relish in that. We should celebrate that wonderful idea. Because it is so creative. And what we tend to do in our educational system as they get older is we push for more conformity. And that very creative thinking that we know is so important in today's times and for the future gets squelched. So when we're working with them, we must celebrate their creativity and enjoy it and enjoy the possibilities that come through it. Each child comes to your classroom with different personal experiences, right? Every child is different. Every child comes to your classroom with a whole different set of issues, problems, celebrations. And we must know and be aware of that, because it will make a difference how we shape the classroom environment. And I'll talk to you about how that does. The materials should be ones that would be interesting for them. And one of the wonderful things about play is it is something that every child at every developmental level enjoys. And so it gives us an opportunity to deal with that. So we want children to be involved in activities that are personally meaningful to them. Because, let me give you an example. I know you would never make this silly mistake I did, but I made a few when I was teaching. Well, probably many. But we were going to set up a banking center. Now, where in the world that ever came from us as a group of teachers, I don't know. Probably part of it was that there was a bank across the street from our facility. So we thought, well, we'll set up a play center and we'll set up a bank. And so we took the children over to visit the bank, and we went inside and we met the manager and talked to the manager, and the kids all asked, and of course I prepared him before we came, of course, you understand. These are 3-, 4-, and 5-year-olds. So he was prepared. And one little boy says, "Where's the money?" And the managers just kind of ignored him. You don't ignore a creative child, right? And he said again, "Where's the money?" And he tried to ignore him again. Not a good choice of behavior. The third time, the little boy said it really loud. "Where's the money?" And the man was kind of turning red and a little sweaty around the ears. And he said, "We don't have any." Now, I wasn't worried about the little boy at that time. I started worried about myself. Because I had direct deposit. And my money was supposed to be in that bank. And if it wasn't there, where was it? And he said, "It's in the main branch bank downtown." Well, of course, that meant nothing to the little kids. Branch bank. And what in the heck is that? So they didn't understand it. We should have gotten a clue right there that this probably is not going to be a good center to set up in the classroom. But you know how sometimes it's hard to let go of an idea? So we set up a bank center. Now, I know your wheels are turning, and you can think of what has happened before I do. Before I tell you. But one little boy took a cardboard box and he made it his car. He got inside of it and he was holding it up like this. And he drove up to the window and he said, "Where's my sucker?" Now what he did is he showed us where his level of understanding was. He didn't understand all this stuff about money and it being in the branch back, but he knew when he went by there with his mom and daddy, he got a sucker. And so all play that occurred was everybody driving a little box up to the window and saying, "Sucker, please." Now, needless to say, this wasn't the level of play that we were after, and I'll show you some others that were a little bit more meaningful than that. During children's levels of play, they do lots of different kinds of play. Sometimes people think they only play one way, but they don't. They play a lot of different ways. One of the ways that they play is with language. And you folks who work with infants, you've heard those little babies in there playing with language. they're playing with their language. Maybe you didn't think about that being play, but it is. And then when they become older, they play with language by rhyming all kinds of words. I thought I'd name my son a really good name until he went to kindergarten. His name was Marty. You know, I should have been smarter, shouldn't I? Marty Farty. So he came home from school the first day of kindergarten just boo-hooing. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Everybody call me Marty Farty." So they are playing with language. It may not be the language you was hoping that they would play with, but nevertheless, they are playing with language. Have you seen them play with language? Enjoy it. It is such a wonderful thing. If they don't have a word for it, they make up one. Well, guess what words are? They're made up to label things. Many words are just labels. And so if they don't have one, they make it up. So great ones. Don't you love her expression? They love to explore every little thing in their environment. You who are with infants and toddlers, you know they will find the little dust piece on the floor, and they will pick it up and they will examine it because they are interested in exploring things. I watched a Head Start teacher with a group of 4-year-olds, and some of them had never seen Elmer's glue before. I find that hard to believe. How could a child in these days and times? But they hadn't. And so one of the first things they wanted to do, she wanted them to cut out of a magazine pictures that looked like their families. Well, there's a problem there right away. But then, when you're a little kid, you cut it out and you put glue on it. Where do you put the glue? Right on the picture. Right? So then when you put the picture on the paper, instead of seeing the mama you thought you cut out of the magazine, you now have a ketchup bottle. Because that was the other side of the picture. So they have to explore the material. So before you can explore how glue works, you just have to explore glue. And that's a very exciting exploration. I've watched them go, and I'm sure you have too. Right? As they peeled it off their fingers. And I actually had one little girl who got quite excited about it. She thought she was going to be pulling down to the bone, and she was very worried about that. But they have to explore the material before they can do a task with it. And I have seen more lessons bomb out because of that. A person will present a new material and not give them time to explore, and all they do is, quote, play with the materials. Because before I can do anything creative with it, I have to first understand it. Onlookers. We used to think that was a real low level of play. But for some children who are quiet or shy or just not ready to do it yet, it's a very appropriate stage for them to watch other children play, to watch other children do things. And then when they build their confidence and they feel better about it, then they're able to jump in and participate. And we have to respect their different speeds. There are some children who are born so that they jump in it the first minute. And then other children who have to watch and see how it works before. Which one is right? There isn't a right or wrong. It depends on the child. Physical play. There's been some interesting research coming out in the last few years about rough and tumble play, which for a long time we kind of felt like was a no-no. They might get hurt. They might do, oh, this is meaning they're going to grow up to be aggressive people. But what we know now is that children need physical play. And we need to have opportunities for them to be involved in that. Oh, I'm really worried about her. She just plays alone. Solitary play. It's okay. Sometimes children want to play by themselves. And so we have to cherish that solitary play is okay. We don't want it all the time, and we'd like for them to learn to cooperate with other people, but there are times when they want to play on their own by themselves, and it's okay. This is a new one we're reading about a lot these days. Sensory play. Now, when you talk about sensory play, you have children who are primarily two different areas here. There are the sensory seekers and the sensory avoiders. Now, think about your classroom. Do you have a child in your classroom who, when you put Play-Doh on the table, they're the first one there, mounding with it, pushing it, kneeling it, sticking their elbows in it, putting their toes in it? That's a sensory seeker. They seek that sensory opportunity. And then there's another child who won't touch it. And I can remember saying many times, oh, you're going to love it when you touch it. If they have sensory issues, they may not love it when they touch it. It literally, for that child who is hypersensitive to these kinds of things, when they touch that Play-Doh, it literally puts needles in their fingers. So what it means is we have to watch the children and see how quickly or how concerned they are about moving into it, because it will give you a clue about where they are sensory seekers or sensory avoiders. One of my favorite kinds of play is symbolic play. And the reason I like symbolic play is because it's so easy to explain how this is an intellectual activity. It is so connected to the brain and how the brain works. And in symbolic play, the child makes something stand for something else. Guess what reading and writing is? Symbolic. A bed doesn't look like a bed. A tomato doesn't look like a tomato. It is a symbol for that. And little children go through levels of this symbolic play development. First, they want something that looks very much like the real thing. Let me give you this example. They're in home living, housekeeping, Wendy Center, whatever the heck you want to call it. It's millions of different names. And they are making coffee. And you walk by, and they get a cup out of the cabinet there, and they give it to you and say, would you like some coffee? How many times has that happened to you? This happens a lot, because they're trying to draw you into their play, you see. But they're also getting a cup that looks like a coffee cup. So it's very closely related to the real thing. Now, a little bit later, you'll go by, and they will give you a dishcloth, which looks nothing like a cup of coffee. And they say, would you like a cup of coffee? And they give it to you. You think, huh? But what they're telling you is, I'm moving to a higher level of symbolic representation. Now I don't have to have a cup that looks exactly like a cup. I can use something else to stand for it. Higher level thinking. And then one fine day, you walk by it and they say to you, would you like a cup of coffee? Take my cup of coffee. Take it. And we think, oh my gosh, what's wrong with them? Maybe we should refer them to the psychiatrist. They're seeing things that are not there. But they're not. What they're showing you is that now I have in my brain a symbol for that cup. And I can imagine it in my head, and I no longer have to have the real thing. And so we see them progressing in their symbolic representation. And all of this is part of their learning experience. In sociodramatic play, they're using language. We're in the midst of a language explosion. Never again will children learn as much language as they do when they're with you. They go from using 2 and 3 words as an infant to by the time they go into kindergarten, they may have 2,000 to 3,000 words. So they're in the midst of a language explosion. Every day when you talk to them and read to them and interact, you are helping them build this. They are beginning to work collaboratively. Oh, I would like to have a cup of coffee. Would you make it for me? Oh, you want money? So they're beginning to understand how to collaborate, to work together in their play. And they are adjusting to other children. No longer is it just me, I'm talking with you. What are we going to have for dinner? So we talk. Well, we could have this, or we could have this, or we could have this, and we determine what it is that we're going to have for dinner. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics is a group that parents listen to. You know, when a pediatric organization makes a statement, they listen. And I was really pleased when about 3 years ago, the American Pediatric Association came out with this statement. Play is essential for helping children reach important social, emotional, and cognitive developmental milestones. Whoa. They finally figured it out. And they're right. So it's not just us as early childhood educators who are saying this. It's a whole medical community of pediatricians who are also saying this is essential. Children who do not have the opportunity or the ability to play are going to have different issues. Now, I always like, it's funny to look at some of the big names and see what they said. But Piaget said, thinking and play are connected to each other, each impacting. Vygotsky said, during play, children use their language to understand things. Are any of you in here a neat freak? You're in the wrong field. I would suggest that you might want to be a librarian or I'm being facetious, I guess you know. But we can't be, we have to realize that children, when they play, do get messy. And that's okay. I also believe that children have to learn responsibility. So that means that they have to help clean up what the mess they made. That's a part of the process. Howard Gardner said in play, children are using thinking, language, and movement and the arts in meaningful ways. Some of you are Head Start teachers. The father of Head Start, Ed Ziegler, said play provides the opportunity for children to talk, collaborate, and problem solve. One of the big skills that we're talking a lot about these days is the ability to solve problems. And so this is one of the ways that do it. And of course, one of the things I love about the field of early childhood, we've always believed in holistic learning. You don't separate, this is intellectual learning, this is physical learning, this is motor. It's all done together. It's all integrated. And in play, that happens. It is a natural part of that. Einstein said, yes, my ideas are best when I am playing. Now, all of this new research on brain development shows that the brain is making connections when children are playing. Each process is unique. It makes growing connections that were not there before. It immerses the child in real life, hands-on, meaningful learning. It ignites cognition. And this is in a block center where something just as simple as some new materials were added. I wish you could have seen this little girl's mama. She is a lawyer. She comes in every day and picks her up and never says a word to the child, and is all the time talking on her cell phone. Right? So we didn't plan this, but we knew lots of children, their parents now have cell phones, right? So if we're trying to be responsive to today's times, what do we add to home living? A cell phone. And this little girl looked exactly like her mother as she took on the role of mama. Now, I told you that you didn't have that. So she was developing her language from also her mother's model and from the model of the teacher as well. We also know that if you add literacy materials to play, that you increase the likelihood that children will use them. And Leslie Morrow, I got all these guys, I had to add a woman, right? Leslie Morrow said that if you will simply add paper and pencil to your centers, guess what happens? They start playing with writing. Just by that simple addition. I went by home living, and on the refrigerator, there was a sticky note. And I thought, gosh, this teacher's really good. This is good stuff. Because she'd put a stack of sticky notes on there and a pencil. And on the refrigerator, there was this orange sticker. And on the orange sticker was some squiggly marks. You and I know as writing. Some people call them squiggly marks, but we know better. We know they know exactly what they put on there. So she put some squiggly marks on there, and I said to her, wow, I see you put up a sticky note. And she said, yeah. You want to know what it says? Sure. It says, start supper, I'll be late. Now she's playing with literacy. And what has she learned? That if you want to send a message in a written form and you're not going to be there, then you have to write it down. So by simply adding those materials in the area, you know that she has begun to do that. In the 21st century skills that we talk a lot about these days, we want children to be creative thinkers. We want them to communicate. We want to collaborate. And we want them to be creative. Because many of the problems our children who are in our classroom now are going to have to solve haven't even been thought of yet. And so we have to produce not fact givers, but thinkers. People who can solve problems. Playing with ideas in science and math. Playing with ideas in small and large motor development. One of the number one characteristics that business corporations say they want from their new employees, to be able to work with other people. We do it. Social skill development, playing in these early years. Respect for all children. No matter what you look like, no matter what your characteristics are, no matter what your abilities are, we respect you as a person. And we teach that with little children because they are. Some people say, well, little children are so on, they say this and that. Little children just say what it is. They're not being cruel or unthinkable. They just say what it is. And what you and I have to realize is that this is part of the social development. We had a little boy who had special needs who was mainstreamed into one of our programs, Inclusive Environment. He had a degenerate muscle disease. He'd been in the classroom with the 3s and 4s, and it was at the end of the 4th with the 4-year-olds that he had to have surgery and had to have a limb amputated. He was out about a month, and his mother said the main thing that got him through that was wanting to get back to that classroom. He wanted to be back there with the other children. So I went down, and the teacher had called me and said, you need to come down. One of the great things about my environment is the Child Study Center is downstairs, and I can just walk right down there and see the children. I get my child fix. And the teacher called me and said, Jeremy's here. You might want to come down. So I walked down, and Jeremy was on the floor, and all the children were around him. And they had Jeremy's pants leg pulled up. And he had had a limb, artificial limb, made for himself. He didn't do it, but of course. And he had it on, and it was the first day he'd worn it. So they had his pants leg hiked up, and they were all hitting on it. And I'm thinking, what's your, your immediate reaction for a teacher is, oh my gosh. And then one of the little boys said the most wonderful thing. He said, Dr. Becky, he's got a new leg. Isn't it wonderful? He can fall down and not even skin his knee. And I thought, the joy of little children. Realizing that this was a wonderful thing. This wasn't something weird. It was wonderful. Now, why were they hitting on it? Because it felt different. That wasn't being mean. They wanted to see what that leg, they had to explore it and feel it and see what it was like. Sometimes we have emotional issues in our early childhood classroom. I'm sure that happens from time to time. That is part of learning how to get along and to work with others, and that's a part of it. Life skills, learning through play. I had a husband tell me one time, it was great being married to an early childhood educator. I said, really? Yeah, I agree with that. Why do you say that? He said, she gives me choices all the time. You can take out the garbage or enter the dishwasher or... And I said, yes, that's true. We do that. So what we know is that they learn life skills by playing with life skills. We built a new frame for our housekeeping. And one of the mothers said as she was picking, oh, that's a nice housekeeping. The girls are going to really enjoy that. I didn't say a word. I was busting, but I didn't. The next day she came in, and guess who had occupied the housekeeping center? It was all boys. There was one little girl over there that was in the center. So it is something that everybody needs to learn. It's life skills. You need to learn how to take care of yourself. And so part of the ways you do that is, of course, through play. And I'm going to stop because I think I know you have to move on, so I'm going to stop and kind of do some closing remarks here. We want children to be responsible, right? How do children get to be responsible? Helping us, helping themselves, helping each other. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that it is easier to do it for them. Right? But guess who learns if I do it for them? Me. If I want them to learn how to do a task, I must allow them to do it and do it at their own level. Now, I want you to think with me about what I wanted as a goal for you today. I wanted you to reiterate, re-emphasize for yourself that children learn through play. Say it with me. Children learn through play. Thank you for being such a great group. I'm going to be out here with my books. Thank you.